Okay, so I said to you all just now that all of this stuff was engraved in law. Okay, all of it. You guys probably have not heard of the Barbados Slave Code. Okay, so in the 1600s, very early o'clock, okay, the British planters in Barbados came up with this thing called the Slave Code. Okay, and this was based on English common law that dealt with felons and vagabonds and so on. Okay, and here's what the slave codes said. Now, the slave codes were implemented as law up and down the Caribbean, as well as in the United States. Okay, right? So it's established that enslaved people be treated as chattel, and established white supremacy as law in the British colony. It sanctioned violence on all aspects of blackness. Okay, whether freed. Okay, so if you're free, you still fall under this slave code. Okay, or if you are, it doesn't matter. Once you are black, that's it. So here's what it says. Okay, this here is the actual copy of the slave code as written in the 1600s. Okay, it says here, Negroes are heathenish, brutish, and uncertain, dangerous kinds of people. This is on page 1 of the slave code. Okay, somewhere in between, somewhere further on in the document, it says this: if any Negro or slave whatsoever shall offer any violence to any Christian, meaning any white person, by striking or the like, such Negro or slave shall, for his or her first offense, be severely whipped by the constable. Okay? For his second offense of that nature, he shall be severely whipped, his nose slit, okay, and be burnt or branded in some part of his face with a hot iron. Okay? And being brutish slaves, they do not or deserve not, for the baseness of their condition, to be tried by a legal trial of 12 men, okay, of their peers, as subjects of England are. And it is further enacted and ordained that if any Negro or other slave under punishment by his master, and this is interesting, unfortunately shall suffer in life, meaning he should die, okay, or be dismembered, okay, which, as they say, seldom happens, but it happened often enough. No person whatsoever shall be liable to any fine thereof. You see, and this was the law of the whole land. Okay, the Barbados slave codes, right? Or the template for all the laws up and down the Caribbean, the British Caribbean at least, and in the United States. Okay, so you see what is going on with Trump? No responsibility at all. You see what I'm saying? All stems from there. All right. Another way of dealing with people is through cruel and inhuman punishment. Okay, so this yoke here was particularly used for people who tried to run away. They would put this heavy yoke on the neck. Okay, three things about it. It was very heavy, so you were oppressed with this thing around your neck. Secondly, if you try to run away, especially in the bush, these hooks here would be caught up in vine and all kind of stuff, right? So you can't really get far. Okay? And thirdly, it was difficult to sleep. You know, you can't sleep with this. You know, right? So this was a problem. Okay? So let me just run this video now, and this is very important because it will tell you how people were treated. Okay? But the same guy who talked about the plantation. Okay, so
all
right, so this one comes from Thistlewood. Remember the guy I showed you earlier? Okay, like I said, you know, Thistlewood is is unique in the history of the Caribbean, okay? Because he wrote everything down. All right. So here's a professor from UWI discussing some of Thistlewood's work. I want you guys to pay clear attention, because he notes in the end that what Thistlewood was doing was not uncommon in this situation. Yeah. So this is Thistlewood. Okay. I don't recall if anybody recalls Bashir. He was an NBC news host. Okay. And he was the one who did the story on Michael Jackson way back in the day, and Michael Jackson being with boys and so on. I don't know if you guys recall that. But anyway, subsequently, he went on to BBC and then NBC. Okay. And when Sarah Palin was going up for elections or something with John McCain, okay, I think after that, when Obama was, won, he made reference to Thistlewood and Sarah Palin pretty much in the same breath. Okay, that Sarah Palin was pretty much behaving the same as Thistlewood, and that caused such a major stink. Okay, he was fired, as a matter of fact, from NBC. Okay, to ever make such a statement. But when you think about it, these people know exactly who their forebears were and what it is they did. You see what I'm saying? You may not know, but they certainly know. Okay? All right. So let's now talk about life in the village. Okay, and I'll try to hurry up because I see PK is sound asleep or he's listening. Okay. So life in the village was interesting. What was a slave village like? Okay, so in the mid-18th century, this was in the 1700s. Okay, I have 4 pictures here of a typical slave village. Okay, Reverend William Smith described the location of the slave villages that you see here. So we're talking about the map of Jessup. Okay, he says here that they live in small huts on the western side, all right, of our dwelling house, so that the plantations resemble a small town. The location, check this out. He said the location meant that we, breathe the pure eastern air without being offended with the least nauseous smell. Okay, so they put the main house closer to the Atlantic. Okay, so that the breeze coming over, they would be on the windward side, and the slaves or the enslaved Africans will be downwind. You see what I'm saying? So they don't have to, according to him, deal with the nauseous smell. Okay, so if you look at Jessup, which is this one here, okay, you will see this is a map from 1755, where the slave house is. Okay, and you see where the slave villages are, the slave houses are. Downwind, if the wind is coming from this side. You see, from the eastern side. Okay. Villages as well were often located on the edge of estate lands or in places that were difficult to cultivate, okay, near deep gullies. Okay, in this case here, you will see that at Hermitage, which is this, it's on the side of a cliff. Yeah, and in Springley, in St. Kitts as well, another village. Okay, it's down in a gully, and it being down in this gully, it was difficult to access really. Okay, so people could live down there. All right. So that was a typical slave village in the Caribbean in terms of food and diet. And this is interesting, some stuff I was able to pull up. Okay. So in many islands, people planted provisions, okay, on lands which they were given, and more often than not, these lands were poor quality. Sometimes they were mountainous and stony, okay? Because they wanted to reserve the good land for cane. You see what I'm saying? All right? They planted provisions like sweet potato, yam, and plantains. Okay, cassava was used to supplement wheat, I suppose. So they grate cassava and you could use the grated cassava. They reared pigs and fowl and so on. Okay, and sometimes on Sundays, okay, because Sundays were generally given for rest and so on. They used to make markets, so they used to exchange some of those things. Saltfish, okay, was very interesting. All right, because saltfish or codfish, okay, was very much traded between the Americans or the people in Newfoundland and the Europeans. Okay, however, they were started to be salted and were used on West Indian plantations. And it was so profitable that the codfish farmers then, more or less shifted emphasis from the European markets to the Caribbean, okay, where they could produce very cheap salted fish, and supply them as basically slave food. You see what I'm saying? All right. Also, callaloo. Callaloo was documented by English and Dutch explorers as regular ingredients in dishes in Nigeria, Congo, Sierra Leone, and Angola way back in the 1400s. Okay, so callaloo comes from there. You see, the only difference really is that the callaloo they used to make over there, they used to use palm oil, okay, from the various palm trees and so on. But in the Caribbean, there's no palm oil. So basically, what it is, they supplemented the dashing bush and other things with, okay, is grated coconut and they squeeze out the milk, right, for the palm oil. And that sort of changed the flavor of the callaloo, okay, to what everybody knows today as callaloo. Yeah? So that is what that was. All right. Meanwhile, back in Europe, the mindset of the Europeans, who were these plantation owners? This guy, Jacques, one of the biggest plantation owners. This is his house in England. Okay. As you can see here, it's in, palatial splendor. This is the outside of the house. Okay. I didn't have room to show you the front of the house. Okay. But this is basically how these West Indian planters lived. Okay. So in terms of Jacques himself, okay, he was one of the biggest plantation owners for over 200 years. 30,000 slaves died at the Jacques plantations in Barbados and elsewhere, according to Hilary Beckles, okay, who is the chairman of the CARICOM Reparations Committee, okay? And he says that the Jacques family has done more harm and violence to the black people of Barbados than any other people, okay? Today, Richard Jacques, okay, his great grandson, sits as a serving member of the Conservative Party for South Dorset since 2010, okay? And that's how the thing, and there are many people, many people, not only in Britain, but also in the US, who can tie their relations right back to these plantation owners. Okay? All right. Okay, many British people, in fact, were slaveholders, and this is a very interesting statistic. Okay, people felt that you only had a few big plantation owners, okay? But 46,000 people in the 1930s, right? Sorry, in the 1830s, were slave owners in England. You see what I'm saying? You had large slave owners like Jacques, okay, who hid behind their names and so on, like West Indian, planter. But you also had a whole heap of smaller middle class slave owners, all right? And there's one thing that I would say, many of them were women. Okay, so many middle class slave owners just had a few slaves, 2 or 3, probably one. Okay, They possessed no land in the Caribbean. They were absentee slave owners, okay? And they rented their slaves out to these landholders. So every year they would make like about £6,000, you know, okay? Right? These people were vicars in the church, iron manufacturers, and lots and lots and lots of widows. Okay? Because when the husband died, they would bequeath their quote unquote possessions to the wife. Okay? In fact, about 40% of the slave owners were women. And how do we know this? And I'll get to that in a second, in the next slide. Okay? Is that all of these people were compensated, you know, when slavery was abolished. Okay? Right? Now, resistance was